What's going on, everybody? It's Aurora Joe, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeper Sunday. So Sleeper Sunday, for those of you that don't know, is a series I came up with showcasing fun hidden decks you may not know about that could deal quite a bit of damage in the proper hands. We'll be going over a basic deck list, strengths, weaknesses, what could be done to make the deck better, and of course a few replays to see the deck in action. In today's episode, y'all voted for Gimmick Puppet, the deck that finally managed to break me. So Gimmick Puppet is an archetype based on macabre dolls, puppets, marionettes, and things of the like, all of which being dark machine monsters used by Quattro in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal anime. Their personal effects usually revolve around the graveyard. Their first wave of support was released in Number Hunters in July of 2013, with their most recent support being in Legendary Duelist Immortal Destiny in September 2019. Correct me if I'm wrong on either of those because it was really messy trying to figure out which came from where. And they have an Xyz focus extra deck that utilizes not just the number mechanic, but also the Chaos Number or CXC sub-archetype mechanic that was showcased, I believe, in the Zexal anime almost exclusively, and in doing so also included the Rank Up Magic series of cards. Now this list that I'm showing you is one that took a lot of time, effort, and care in order to create, and I did make it along with chat if you want to see the replays in which I get completely folded with this deck, but also the commentary as I won the 2 games that I actually managed to win with this deck. Then I do have an unedited VOD of which I streamed this deck with, but I did manage to come to at least what I find to be one of the better builds that I could have made with it. And starting us off is with 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Dreary Doll. So as you can see, the theme relies on these puppets and like the kind of creepy look that they have. This is the lost art technically, but it's the only artwork that EDO Pro actually has, interestingly enough. In the TCG, she doesn't have any blood or anything on her, and instead of a coffin, she's in a gift box, which is like interesting, I guess. But Dreary Doll is the one that kickstarted the entire like point of the graveyard part of the deck, because it says if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish another Gimmick Puppet monster from your graveyard to special summon this card. You can only use this effective Dreary Doll once per turn, and it can only be used for the Xyz summon of a Gimmick Puppet monster. So basically, Dreary Doll ends up being the heart and soul of the archetype. Not only is she the best way to get a level 8 body on board while utilizing the graveyard mechanic of the deck, she's also one of your only sources of follow-up later on. Granted, being a hard once per turn is a little annoying, and even more annoying is their Xyz restriction, because, I mean, God forbid that you play a Dreary Doll engine in some other deck involving other Gimmick Puppet monsters. I don't know why you would do that, but she is basically the best monster in the entire deck, and if you were to play something like Machine Duplication, then it just gives you 2 free extra level 8 bodies from the deck. Next is 3 copies of Gimmick Puppet Magnet Doll. This one is incredibly simple. It says if your opponent controls a monster and all monsters you control are face-up Gimmick Puppets, you can special summon this card from your hand. This is, like I said, incredibly simple, really easy. All you have to do is just special it from hand. It's not once per turn, it's an inherent summon. Granted, though, that Magnet Doll's existence and then a couple of other cards in the deck are some of the main things that make it like to where you have to blind second in order to see like the most success. The problem, though, is that you still have to play through disruptions and stuff. However, Magnet Doll being a non-activated effect is pretty nice because your opponent doesn't really have a good window to respond to it. So next is one of their few new cards that they ended up getting out of Legendary Duelist Immortal Destiny, and this is Gimmick Puppet Bisque Doll. So Bisque Doll, as most of them, is a level 8, and it says you can special her from your hand by discarding a Gimmick Puppet monster, and this is an inherent summon. And you can banish this card from your graveyard. Your opponent cannot target Gimmick Puppet monsters you control with card effects this turn. So Bisque Doll overall is just an all-around really good card for the deck. So a non-once per turn, again, inherent summon, but this time you can use it going first by discarding and filling up your graveyard with Gimmick Puppets. Absolutely amazing. And then not to mention, you can banish her from grave to give targeting protection to every Gimmick Puppet on your field this turn. And given that this deck does want to go second more often than not, it ends up just being amazing for things, you know, not just going first like Impermanent Veiler, but going second anything like targeting spot removal. Not to mention, neither of these are a once per turn, and so while the inherent summon probably isn't going to go off more than once per turn, if you do get the second effect of Bisque Doll negated by something that isn't a targeting disruption, you can just end up using another copy and it's completely free. Another one of their newest cards is Gimmick Puppet Terror Baby. So this is a level 4 Dark Machine, and they do have level 4s as well, and this ties into some other things that we'll talk about later. And Terror Baby says when this card is normal summoned, you can target a Gimmick Puppet monster in your grave except for Terror Baby, special it in defense position, and you can banish it from your graveyard, and your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of your Gimmick Puppet monster effects this turn. So Terror Baby has some cons, but it also has some really good pros. Obviously, special summoning anything from your graveyard that you've already been stocking up from your graveyard is really good, especially because they do have a rank 4 and a link 2 that we will get to that you can almost always immediately access by using this effect. But more importantly, the second effect is huge when going second, because as almost every single disruption when you're going second, a lot of them are just going to end up wanting to be in a response to yours, like a negate or something like that. But if you use Terror Baby, your opponent can't respond to any of your things, and making everything a spell speed 4 is just absolutely huge. Some of the only issues I have with Terror Baby though is that because it's a level 4, it doesn't give you immediate access to your rank 8 plays, which is the more important part of your deck, and then also it only works on normal summon, and considering you have multiple cards in your deck that allow you to special summon Gimmick Puppets from your hand or something like that, it just ends up being really annoying because like you'll be able to special summon the Terror Baby, and if you would have been able to trigger the Terror Baby's effect off of that, you would have gone for like an extra XCs, an extra link, something like that. But because you have to normal summon it, it ends up making you not want to commit your normal summon to something else like one of the cards that we will mention next, that being Gimmick Puppet Humpty Dumpty. So Gimmick Puppet Humpty Dumpty is a card that I decided to add in after a while. This is one of their older cards. It's at level 4 that says when this card is normal or special summon, you can special a Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand, and you can only use this effect of Humpty Dumpty once per turn. So Humpty suffers from the same issue as Terror Baby in that unless you're going for the rank 4 or the link 2, it doesn't really give you access to your rank 8 plays, so more often than not you're making a link 2, because unless you open a Terror Baby, then you're not going to be able to go for a rank 4 either. But because the link 2 can end up being so incredibly important, and because technically if you do open this and Terror Baby, you can make their rank 4, which is a really strong rank 4. I'll say that right now. We end up having to play Humpty just for that little bit of extra extension. So surprisingly enough, that's actually it for all the Gimmick Puppet monsters that we play. Just a side note, all of them are terrible. All the other ones I should say are terrible, or just not really worth playing. So onto the non-Gimmick Puppet cards in the deck. We have 2 copies of Therian King Regulus. This is something I made after stream because I realized that because you can make rank 8s and rank 4s, you can easily go for Merrymaker and Champion Sargus, which just give you a free Regulus search. And considering that this deck doesn't really have any going first place other than sitting on Hope Harbinger Pass, Regulus ends up making it at least a little bit better because then you can make Hope Harbinger Regulus Pass, or at least Regulus Pass, which is better. But more importantly, Regulus is a level 8, so at the bare minimum, it's a free level 8 that you can summon from your hand. And then another engine that I decided to add to the deck is a very small danger engine, just 3 copies of Bigfoot, 3 copies of Thunderbird. So the dangers add a lot for the deck. So not only are you getting free level 8 bodies on board potentially, that are huge by the way, like we have 3k on Bigfoot and 28 on Thunderbird, but we're also getting free draw power, we're getting free removal effects if they're discarded by anything, which includes things, not like Droplet, right? Okay, no, so basically only by the effect of Bigfoot and Thunderbird. But you're getting free removal effects off of those. But most importantly, you're getting free things out of your hand. There are so many situations where you're stuck with something like Dreary Doll in your hand that you don't want in your hand because you have no way to get rid of it. And so you just get a free Dreary Doll in your graveyard, and you get a draw and a level 8 body. This does conflict with a couple of things like that we will talk about in a little bit. However, it ends up being beneficial more often than not, and that's the other card I was talking about, Trade-In. I'll mention that you can trigger these off of Trade-In, that's what I was thinking of. But I really like the Danger package, and honestly, more often than not, the Dangers just end up being better Xyz material than the Gimmick Puppets themselves, and they kind of end up hard carrying the deck at times. And then finally, because this is a blind second deck, we are playing 3 copies of Nibiru the Primal Being. Much like the Dangers, this does conflict with some things that we'll talk about later, but it's a free 3k body that wipes the opponent's entire board, and will make it significantly easier for you to try to break apart whatever they may have left, and try to go for the kill if you can. That's it for the monsters. Onto the spells, we have 3 copies of Condolence Puppet. This is one of their newest cards. It says send Gimmick Puppet monsters with different names from your deck to the graveyard, up to the number of monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned from the extra deck +1, and you can banish this card from your graveyard and target a machine Xyz you control. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while face up on the field, and you can only use each effect of Condolence Puppet once per turn. This card is by far the best in the entire deck. So, bare minimum, this card's a free Foolish Burial, which I mean, Foolish Burial is at 1, this is at 3, what else do I want to say? But more often than not, going second, you're going to be sending 2, 3, even 4 Gimmick Puppets from your deck to the graveyard. And considering you have effects like Dreary Doll, Bisque Doll, and Terror Baby that you can use after that, it ends up just being such a massive plus for you, because that's a free body, free targeting protection, and free spell speed 4 to all of your Gimmick Puppet effects. And then on top of that, they also gave it a graveyard effect, allowing you to make your machine Xyz unable to be destroyed by opponent's card effects while face up on the field. And considering the deck doesn't have the most amazing protection, this is really good, but because it just says machine Xyz period, it gives it to things like Zeus as well, so that can make your Zeus even harder for your opponent to out. And as a heads up, Zeus is like one of the best plays that this deck has because they lock you into machine Xyz very frequently. I've seen a lot of Gimmick Puppet lists play 1 or 2 of this because it is a hard once per turn, but like, I really want to open this card, and I'm in a better spot opening it than not opening it, so I'm gonna play 3. And then the other Gimmick Puppet spell we play is Junk Puppet. It just, simple enough, target Gimmick Puppet in your grave, special summon it, and you can only activate 1 per turn. And because this is a hard once per turn, I was playing like 3 and 2 of this at one point, but I decided to just throw in a Monster Reborn instead because it's an additional copy, essentially, that isn't hard once per turn and can summon from the opponent's graveyard, so why not? And on to the rank up magics. I'm playing 3 different rank up magics. So the best one by far is rank up magic Numeron Force. It says target a face-up Xyz monster you control, special summon from your extra deck a number C monster with the same type as that monster you control, but 1 rank higher by using it as the entire material. This is treated as an Xyz summon, transfers materials, blah blah blah. Then negate the effects of all face-up cards on the field other than the summoned monster, if any. This card is one of the best cards that you can see going second, but not worth it enough to play more than 1, which is interesting, maybe 2 at tops. But not only getting into your stronger Xyz monsters, but also just mass negating everything on the field will make it so much easier for you to break apart boards that your opponent might have held off effects on, and it just ends up being one of the best things you can see in your opening hand, but I just really don't want to play more than maybe 2 maximum. I'm also playing a rank up magic Quick Chaos. It's literally just a rank up into a number C with the same number, but as a quick play. It's fine. I mean, if I drop anything for a second copy of Numeron, it's going to be Quick Chaos. There's really little benefit to using Quick Chaos other than avoiding things like Imperm, Veiler, or any spot removal, but that's kind of why I have it in here, because spot removal can be the death of this deck. And then our final rank up magic is rank up magic Argent Chaos Force, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the one that was banned for a while. I think this is the one that was banned for Utopic Zexal until Zexal finally got banned. But you target a rank 5 or higher Xyz you control, special a number C or C Xyz monster that is 1 rank higher than that monster you control by using it as material, and then gain the materials and everything like that. But most importantly, when a rank 5 or higher Xyz is special to your field while this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand, and this is a once per duel effect. So Argent Chaos Force is really nice because it basically gives you 2 uses out of it, because you usually will go, say you'll go into like your Gimmick Puppet of Strings, you'll rank up using this into your Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strings, and then you'll end up making like a Zeus or something if you can't kill. On the summon of that Zeus, you can add back the Argent Chaos Force to your hand, and so you can use it again next turn. So it ends up being one of the only follow-up things that you usually can get in this deck, and so we do want to play at least 1 copy of this. As I mentioned earlier, we are playing 3 copies of Trade-In. For some reason, when I very first built this deck, and I was literally about to play Allure for draw power, and then I watched a deck profile and I'm like, oh yeah, they're mostly level 8s and they want to be in the graveyard. Why am I not playing Trade-In? So yeah, this gives you graveyard setup, free draw power, can trigger the dangers. Trade-In is a fantastic card. And then finally, we are playing 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. So we're playing Droplet over something like Dark Ruler or Evenly for a few reasons, mainly because we do want to go for game, and this does help you go for game, but also because Droplet does put things in your graveyard like a Dreary Doll, Bisque Doll, Terror Baby, etc. And so it can end up helping you advance your plays as well as stopping your opponent's board. That is it for the main deck. Onto the extra deck, we have 2 copies of number 40 Gimmick Puppet of Strings. So all of them just require 2 level 8 monsters or 3 of whatever level that they are for the rank up ones, and they all have usually removal effects. So a Gimmick Puppet of Strings says once per turn you can attach a material from this card, place a string counter on each face-up monster on the field except this card, and once per turn during the next end phase of the opponent of the player who placed a string counter by this effect, destroy the monsters with string counters, and if you do, burn your opponent for 500 for each monster destroyed. So this actually ends up being the best Xyz in your entire extra deck, which is why we're playing 2 copies of it, but it may be a bit confusing because other than the 3k body, it's like, this effect seems really slow, why would you want to play multiples of this? Well, that's because the rank up version is number C40, Gimmick Puppet of Dark Strings. So there's a rank 9 with 3,300 attack and 2,000 defense. It requires 3 level 9s, but you're going to be ranking up into it. And if this card is special summoned, destroy as many monsters with string counters as possible, and if you do, draw 1 card, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack among those destroyed monsters in your graveyard, your choice if tied. And then once per turn, you can attach a material from this card, place a string counter on each face-up monster your opponent controls. So we're going to ignore that last effect because the last effect doesn't matter as much, but this card ends up being the biggest blow in your entire extra deck. I mean, not only is it a mandatory effect, but it blows up everything basically on your opponent's field, and you get to draw a card and do a little bit of burn so it can replenish the resources that you use, like the rank up magic. So you do usually have to see a rank up magic in order to see this, obviously, but it's just so worth it. And you're probably wondering, why are we playing 2 dark strings but not, or 2 strings, sorry, and then not a second dark strings to go off these second strings? Well, read again the first effect saying if this card is special summon, not Xyz summon. This means you can go into a strings, place the counters or whatever, rank up into the dark strings, use its effect, and then get rid of the dark strings for something like Zeus, the Link monster, getting it removed by just any other effect. then you can later summon another strings, and then you can go Junk Puppet, Monster Reborn, Terror Baby, anything like that. You can revive the Dark Strings, and this will trigger the Dark Strings effect again on summon to blow up everything with string counters. This is why you don't need more than one Dark Strings, but why it is pretty beneficial to play at least a second Strings, so that you can utilize the nuke effect again. We're also playing one copy of number 15 Gimmick Puppet Foot Lettuce, also known as Giant Grinder. This requires 2 level 8s as well. It has 1500 attack and 2500 defense, so it's not really going to be attacking over anything, but it is a decent wall. And it says up to twice per turn during your main phase 1, you can attach a material from this card, then target a special summon monster your opponent controls, destroy it, and then if it was an Xyz monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. So Giant Grinder is actually a pretty solid Xyz monster overall for what it's worth. I mean, it's a twice per turn, so you can get rid of 2 monsters for basically free. If you are going against a deck that utilizes Xyz, you can get some, free burn there. This card does have some problems, however, not only having really terrible stats overall, but also the during your main phase 1 clause actually ended up screwing me over in a game on stream. I think I was playing against Purely specifically, and I was going to blow up like 2 of their Xyz, do a bunch of burn, and then rank up into something, but then I read the main phase 1 thing, and I ended up losing because of it. But funnily enough though, even though it's just okay, Giant Grinder actually ends up being mostly better than its rank up counterpart because it is a twice per turn, as opposed to number C15 Gimmick Puppet Giant Hunter, which says once per turn you can attach a material from this card, then target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it, and then if it was a monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. So again, while this does say card and it burns it for any monster, not just Xyz monster, Giant Grinder being a twice per turn kinda just makes it a little bit better overall. Like, I would much rather rank up Giant Grinder into like a Dark Strings after making a Strings or something, because the Dark Strings is bigger. Not to mention Giant Hunter literally has worse stats than a Mystial. Like, I get the point of this being a once per turn is that you're supposed to go into Giant Grinder to attach the 2 materials it has to pop, and then go for a rank up into Giant Hunter, and then use the Giant Grinder as the last material for a pop here. So that can get you 3 pops, which is pretty solid. But, I mean, it still ends up just being kind of weak, especially because this is the only thing that each of these cards does, compared to Strings and Dark Strings having separate effects. On the topic of newer Gimmick Puppets, though, we have Gimmick Puppet Gigantus Doll. So this is their new rank 4 monster that you're supposed to make with something like Terror Baby, Humpty Dumpty, etc. It requires 2 level 4 Gimmick Puppets, has 0 attack and 2000 defense, and it says you can attach 2 materials from this card, then target up to 2 monsters your opponent controls, gain control of them until the end phase. Also, for the rest of the turn, you're locked into Gimmick Puppets and declaring attacks with Xyz monsters. That's not all though, because you can tribute this card to make all monsters you control become level 8 currently until the end of the turn, and you can only use each effect a Gigantus Doll once per turn. So this card is something that honestly I regret not going into as much because it's just really, really good. Again, you're going to be going second more often than not with this deck anyway, so if you can find a way to break your opponent's board with something like Droplet, for example, or even if you do play something like Dark Ruler, you get to take 2 of your opponent's monsters, so you're ripping 2 off of their field. You can tribute this card and then make both of those monsters level 8, and then you can turn those into literally any Gimmick Puppet Xyz that you feel like, and depending on what's left on their board, this can make something like Strings into Dark Strings if you have a rank up magic in hand. It can make a Giant Grinder for 2 pops and then a Giant Hunter for a 3rd pop if you have a rank up magic in hand. And overall, it's just a really good way of removing things from the board. Though the problem is that they do have a bunch of level 4s, but only 2 of them are really playably good, so this relies on you either opening Humpty Terror Baby or dumping a Humpty Dumpty and then normal summoning Terror Baby to special up from grave. So it is a bit convoluted, but honestly, it's completely worth it. This card is just so strong, and I really should start using it more often. As I mentioned earlier, we do play the 1 Merrymaker and 1 Gigantic Champion Sargus. Getting a free search for Regulus is just absolutely amazing. And then the second effect of Sargus to bounce or destroy a card on the field is really good in this deck because, granted, it is very hard for you to make more than 1 Xyz per turn that isn't based on a rank up, unless you open like the Dangers, for example. So yeah, Sargus and another Xyz that'll activate its effect for you to use the Sargus is a little rare, but it can be something that comes up. Not to mention, if you are going second, it becomes a little bit better. We're also playing 1 copy of Dingirsu. This is another thing that I added a bit last second because I saw a few people playing Dingirsu, and I was like, yeah, it is a Dark Machine Xyz monster that you can special while under most of the locks, and it's a free send, it's free protection, and if you really want to, you can attach one of your banished machines like Dreary Doll, Basic Doll, Terror Baby, etc., put it under as material, and then you can send it to the grave by linking it off into their link monster and put that monster back into the graveyard. Honestly, Dingirsu does have a lot of synergy with the deck. That's probably not going to be something you're going to be making too often. As always, with any of our rank 8 focused decks on Sleeper Sunday, we are playing the Draglubion, Hope Harbinger, and Numeron Dragon package. Until Regulus, this was basically the only thing that could help you go first, and Numeron Dragon is the easiest way to OTK. I mean, literally, you can use 2 dangers to go into this and OTK without even seeing a Gimmick Puppet monster in your hand, but it's better to play it than not play it, Identity or not. And then also 1 copy of Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder. I'm considering playing 2 of this because, again, there are a lot of machine Xyz restrictions in the deck, so this is one of your better plays that you can do, and just pray your opponent doesn't have any follow-up. And making a second one of this could end up being the nail in the coffin. Haha, get it? Joke, coffin? No? Okay. I'll just have to find a room in order to put the Zeus in there somewhere. But then we also have 2 copies of Gimmick Puppet Chimera Doll as the only link monsters in the deck. So this card came out with Bisque Doll, Terror Baby, etc. in the most recent wave of support. It requires 2 machine monsters, and it has down left and down right pointing arrows. It says during your main phase, if you control this link summon card, you can activate this effect. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except machine Xyz monsters. Also take a Gimmick Puppet monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. Then, if all monsters you control are Gimmick Puppet monsters, minimum 1, you can special summon 1 Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand, and you can only use each effect of Chimera Doll once per turn. So Chimera Doll, it falls under the category of really, really good legacy support link monsters in a really, really mediocre deck. Chimera Doll kind of just does everything for your deck. I mean, at the cost of 2 machine monsters, period. So this can include things like Zeus. It could also include like a level 4 and a level 8 in case you can't make any Xyz plays with that. You get to either search or dump any of your Gimmick Puppets from your deck, which can set up their graveyard effects for things like Dreary, Bisque, and Terror Baby, or can add them to the hand for things like Terror Baby, Humpty Dumpty, or Magnet Doll. And then on top of that, get you a free body from hand if you only control Gimmick Puppets. So this is a bit annoying for a few reasons. So for one, it makes the Dangers and Regulus and Nib a lot more annoying to use because you have to control only Gimmick Puppets, but also because it says minimum 1, I got Ghost Ogred, I think it was, on Chimera Doll, and I wasn't able to special for free, and it ended up making me lose. It does require a bit of a commitment considering the deck already has a bit of a hard time swarming as is, but it ends up getting you a free Xyz more often than not, so you kind of do have to play it. So that does it for the actual cards we do play. On to the cards that we don't play from the archetype or outside of the archetype that could in theory work. There's a lot of them. So starting off with everyone's favorite branded expulsion target, we have Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. So ignoring the fact that it's being used right now in the current meta in order to lock people out of special summoning, period, this card sucks in Gimmick Puppet. So you can special it from your hand by tributing a face-up Xyz you control. You can only special summon Nightmare once per turn this way, and when you do, you can special another Nightmare from your hand or graveyard, and if this card is special summoned, you cannot special summon any monsters for the rest of this turn except Gimmick Puppet monsters. So by tributing an Xyz monster, you know, something that's like one of your actual boss monsters with really good stats, you get a 1000 by 2000 attack monster that may special another copy of itself, not just any Gimmick Puppet, just another copy of itself, and you're still locked into Gimmick Puppets for the whole turn, meaning that you can't go in anything like Dingirsu, Zeus, Sargus. Like, this card just sucks. Like, why would I use this ever, except for, like, to maybe get rid of a useless Xyz that already use all of its materials, but at that point, I'd rather link it off in a Chimera Doll. Like, this card's terrible. Another card that's just kind of terrible and out of place is Gimmick Puppet Shadow Feeler. Human Centipede reference aside, it cannot be destroyed by battle. When you take battle damage from an opponent's direct attack while it's in your graveyard, you can special it from your graveyard in face-up attack position and take 1000 damage, and that's a hard once per turn, and if it's as an Xyz material and would be sent to the graveyard, banish it instead. So the problem with Gimmick Puppet I've noticed is that a lot of their cards you can tell are ripped straight from the anime because they don't really cohere with the rest of the archetype. They just kind of do their own thing and just exist for like certain jank scenarios that happen. Like, where would you see this used outside of specifically an anime moment? Like, it doesn't really help for going for Xyz plays because you're just summoning it in attack, taking a bunch of damage from it being attacked, and then like, I don't know, like, it just sits there, and then it's banished instead of being sent to the graveyard if it's attached as a Xyz material, because God forbid you get an extra Dreary Doll material engraved. Just don't play this card. And then for the final card that's basically the exact same scenario, Gimmick Puppet Twilight Joker says when a Gimmick Puppet monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to your graveyard, you can banish that monster to special this card from your hand, and this is a hard once per turn. Why would you play this card? I mean, not only is it another battle-focused effect like Shadow Feeler, but like, it's super specific requires you to banish the monster that was destroyed, meaning you have less materials for Dreary Doll, or like even worse, potentially not a Dreary Doll engraved now, just to get a level 8 body that folds to like most normal summons. Another one that's like, why does it exist outside of the anime? Onto a card that's not actually terrible, but probably shouldn't be left out of the side deck. This is Gimmick Puppet Egghead. So Gimmick Puppet Egghead says you can only use the effect of him once per turn, and you can discard a Gimmick Puppet monster to activate one of these effects. So either you inflict 800 to your opponent, or make its level become 8 until the end phase. This card's not horrible. I mean, you're getting discard fodder, so that means you get free things in your graveyard like Dreary, Bisque, or Terror Baby. And then also becoming level 8 isn't the worst thing, considering that stuff like Humpty Dumpty can special this from hand, in case you already have something like Magnet Doll. But most importantly, this card burns for 800, so I'm certain that for the 2 Gimmick Puppet players that do exist, they're running this as a time card, so you do you, y'all. And then the final main deck Gimmick Puppet monster that we do not play is Gimmick Puppet Gear Changer. This is a level 1 that says it cannot be special summoned from the deck. Once per turn, you can target a Gimmick Puppet monster you control except this card, and this card's level becomes the current level of that monster. They just had to make Machine Dupe worthless, huh? If this card could be special from the deck, I guarantee it would be a 2 or 3 of, and you'd play at least 2 or 3 Machine Dupes just to get this on board, because this would end up being free Xyz fodder, but no. Why would Gimmick Puppet be allowed to have nice things? Why would this be super broken if it could be summoned off Machine Dupe, Konami? You have to hard open this and Machine Dupe just to use it, and then you might get value off of it if you already have a level 8 on board. Like, I don't know, man. This could have been really good, but it just ends up being terrible. So they do also have 2 Xyz monsters that we don't play, starting with number 88, Gimmick Puppet of Leo. So this requires 3 level 8 monsters, and it says once per turn, if you have no cards in your spell and trap zone, you can attach a material from this card, and if you do, place a destiny counter on this card. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect, and if 3 destiny counters are on this card, you win the duel. So this is actually not the first time that we've seen an alternate win condition on this series. I think I actually, in the Reptilian video, didn't point out the stuff we didn't play. So the problem with a lot of these decks that I show off is that they have a lot of cards, and so I don't include all of them in the side portion, because lately I've been starting to use it for cards we don't play, instead of cards that you could play. But this isn't the first alt win condition that we've seen, technically, in any of these archetypes we've covered. And this one, surprisingly enough, isn't the worst one, because now that I think about it, you could easily use a deck like Runic along with this and just like sit on Leo and then like keep spamming Runic cards, because you don't have to set the Runic cards to clog up your back row, and you're not using your battle phase anyway, so like you could probably just take 3 turns and easily go Leo for the game. But I mean, other than that, why would you go into this over making 2 rank 8s? Because this requires 3 materials, and you could easily just use 2 of those for something else and then get 1 other body on board. Like, it's already hard enough getting more than 2 bodies on board in this deck. So unless you're building a very specific build around Leo, I think honestly it's just incredibly out of place, and again, I'm pretty sure it just serves as like a bunch of anime nonsense. And then it doesn't get any better with its rank up form. Number C88, Gimmick Puppet Disaster Leo, must be special summoned with a rank up magic spell targeting Puppet of Leo. Neither player can target this card with card effects, so I mean, hey, at least we finally have protection on one of their cards. And then once per turn, you can attach a material from this card, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent, and during your end phase, if your opponent's life points are 2,000 or less and this card has no materials, you win the duel. So they have another win condition on this card, and they somehow made the rank up version even worse. So, I mean, not to mention like the fact that Leo you can actually win in like 3 turns. This would bare minimum require 6 turns, but that's the funny thing. Even ranking up the Leo and having 4 materials under this, you can't go for game off of just this effect alone. Like with Leo, you can just sit with the 3 materials it has, detach, 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 and then you win the duel. For this, you have to literally detach all 4, they get put to 4,000, and then you still have to do 2,000 points of damage some other way, be it Egghead or by battle. And I mean, this card does have 3,500 attack, and you don't lose your battle phase like with regular Leo, so you could actually do that, but why would you punch once and then wait 4 turns to go for game, when you could just punch 3 times for game because this card's 3,500 attack? It's crazy how they made the rank up version like significantly worse than the original when Leo already was just a really gimmicky card. I mean, funnily enough, this is the only gimmick in the entire deck. The rest of it's just a generic rank 8 spam deck. But yeah, both of these cards, not really worth it. So one of their actually many back row that we don't play is Puppet Ritual. This is one of their older ones. It says if your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 higher than yours, you can target 2 level 8 Gimmick Puppets monsters in your graveyard and special summon those targets. cards. And you can only activate one Puppet Ritual per turn, and you cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. So, for some reason, a lot of the older cards, and even one of the newer cards, has a fascination with 2000. Like, let me know if it's an anime thing, if you've watched Zexal. I never finished Zexal. And so, like, the Disaster Leo saying 2000 or less, and then Puppet Ritual, and then later on Puppet Parade involving 2000 or higher life points, like, let me know if that's like an actual reference, because otherwise I just have no idea why that's a thing. But otherwise, this card just kind of sucks. I mean, like, not only is it really gimmicky in that your opponent has to have 2000 higher life points than yours, which, I mean, you're already losing in that situation, but you just get 2 reborns when you already have Dreary Doll, Junk Puppet in your deck. Like, you can already get 2 free bodies, so you have to hard open this anyway, because they have no way to search their Puppet back row, by the way. All of their back row has Puppet in the name, and they can't search any of it, which is kind of stupid. But then the cherry on top there is that you cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate it. Why? There are better archetypes with better double reborn cards in the entire game, but this deck can't have it. Okay, Perform Puppet is one of their newer cards. It's a continuous spell that says you can banish a Gimmick Puppet monster from your graveyard. All monsters you currently control become that banished monster's level until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. And if a face-up Gimmick Puppet monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished Gimmick Puppet monsters and special summon it. You can only use each effect to Perform Puppet once per turn. So we're finally back into a situation where this card's actually not bad. The problem is that because they can't search their Puppet cards, you want to max out on this card, and then it ends up breaking later on. Like, this card would be a one-of if it could be searched. Otherwise, I just wouldn't recommend playing it. I do like the level modulation because it makes your dead level 4s become level 8s, which is really, really important. But the second effect is also pretty good, actually, because summoning back banished Gimmick Puppets can apply to anything you banish off a Dreary Doll, or it can apply to Bisque or Terror Baby, so you can get their protection later. Finally, onto non-Gimmick Puppet cards, we have Zexal Construction. Reveal a card in your hand, and if you do, add one of the following cards from deck to hand, then shuffle the revealed card in the deck. None of these matter except for the rank up magic. Basically, they don't have any way to search rank up magics in this deck despite revolving around rank up magics. And so this and, let me actually put this over here, 7th Ascension, these are all the only ways that you can search for rank up magics. And another reason why we play Quick Chaos is because if we were playing 7th Ascension, this would be a way to search Quick Chaos. We also have the brand new Baryantopia. I think it's called, like, I forgot what it was called. I think it's like Baryon Untopia or something like that. I know there was like a big controversy around the name Untopia because it sounds stupid. But it's a field spell that says always treat it as a Baryons card. Your opponent cannot target CXCs, number Cs, and number monsters with a number between 100 and 107 in their names you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, so this doesn't really matter. None of our things have 100 in their name. But most importantly, once per turn, if you special summon an Xyz monster with a rank up magic spell's effect, you can target that Xyz monster and a monster your opponent controls, attach that opponent's monster to that Xyz monster as material. So if the protection actually applied to your monsters instead of, you know, just the second effect, I mean, technically, can it work with Numeron Dragon? No, because that's number 100. So yeah, we have literally nothing in the extra deck that works with the effect to protect. So maybe if it worked with both of the effects, we'd probably consider it because they don't have their own field spell. But otherwise, I mean, just having the second effect, it makes it a bit too niche. So if you do want a better way to utilize your level 4s instead of just going into Gigantus Doll or some other rank 4 like Merrymaker, you can actually go into Raider's Knight, who can then go into Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. Remember, this detaches a material to gain attack equal to the total original attack of all other monsters on the field on top of the already 3,000 it has. But everything else on the field has its effects negated, so it's just really free. I mean, this card is going for game 99% of the time. Honestly, I'd consider playing this if I probably took out the Merrymaker Sargus package because it's just so easy to access. So y'all, this has so many different options that you could play or bad cards that we don't play. I had to make a completely separate list in order to actually showcase them all. Ignore the main and extra here. This was from a previous build from ages ago, but for the other cards that you could end up playing, or that I did play at some point, Rank Up Magic, Admiration of the Thousand, targets one or more Xyz in your grave, all of the same rank. Specials from the extra deck, a number C or CXCs that is one rank higher than those monsters, and then attaches all of those monsters to it as material, and then you're locked into no special summons that turn. So this would end up just being like a last-ditch resort card because you could go for any of your rank 8s, and then go into either Giant Hunter or the Dark Strings, which are really awkwardly spaced right now. But honestly, because you already have a bunch of ways to reborn stuff that would honestly be more beneficial than just summoning a single thing from your extra deck, I think that this card isn't really that worth it. Machine Dupe is a card that I did play, but I ended up cutting in order to make room for stuff because it was a little bit niche and harder to resolve, but there are a lot of targets like Dreary Doll, Humpty Dumpty, Terror Baby, etc. that you could end up getting free bodies on board off of, so it is a pretty good card still. And then Gearspring Spirit is a card that I actually just very recently cut, and that's because of the complications that it has with cards like Nibiru and the Dangers, because it says it cannot be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned from your hand by having only machines in your graveyard, minimum 1, and once per turn you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, its attack becomes 0 until the end phase. So this card is actually really good in a pure Gimmick Puppet build because it's a free level 8 body, not a once per turn, and the second effect is a soft once per turn. By making anything 0, it'll make it significantly easier for you to OTK. However, because it required already existent graveyard setup, and because otherwise it would end up breaking, and I really wanted to play Nib and the Dangers, I ended up having to cut it because the Dangers especially were making the graveyard filled with non-machines, and then this card ends up just becoming completely dead because you can't summon it by literally any other means, so I ended up just having to cut it for those reasons. But if you don't want to play the Dangers and you're not really that worried about your Nib hitting the grave, then I would really recommend this card. Wow, I thought that was going to be a shorter deck profile because I was getting through it a little bit faster, but there was just so many different things to talk about in the side section. But I think with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and let y'all see the 2 replays that I actually have for this deck. I know it's not many compared to what I usually have. I usually have at least 5 for any of these videos, but it was just really hard for me to win with this deck, which I will talk about a bit more in the strengths and weaknesses section and how to make the deck better. But I do hope that you do enjoy the replays that I have anyway, and without further ado, I'll see you when those are done. So yeah, those were the only 2 games I ended up winning. So the Endymion player's case, I mean, I did mess up when I was trying to target that Cerberus and destroy it there. I didn't even know it couldn't be destroyed. I haven't played with Mythical Beast cards in literal years. But as you can see, the game plan of literally just making Zeus is kind of the biggest thing this deck has, and a lot of Xyz decks, not gonna lie, on the lower tier, end up having to do that. But against that, like, Archfiend Labyrinth player, I don't know what it was, Draglubion's targeting protection was so funny. Like, I didn't even know it had targeting protection. I forgot they had the big welcome in Grave, so I wasn't too worried, and then I saw it and I was like, oh man, here I go losing, because I thought they were going to OTK me, but they didn't. But then I didn't realize Reglubion had targeting protection, so they had to bounce their own card. Granted, they could have just waited for, I believe, the Numeron Dragon, right? Because let me see, Draglubion... Yeah, it doesn't give protection to anything like that, so they could have just waited for the Numeron Dragon and, like, murdered me there, but they didn't, so, I mean, we take the free win. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this deck. So, All of the graveyard effects feel very, very powerful, and with the practical need to go second, having the protection granted by Bisque and Terror Baby can make it near impossible for your opponent to stop you from playing, and with cards like Condolence Puppet, it's usually not hard to pack your graveyard full of puppets at any point. Being a rank 8 focused deck, the rank 8 pool is one of the most powerful toolboxes in the extra deck in the entirety of the game, and packed with plenty of removal, OTK potential, and other such things like that. And depending on your hand, strings in a rank up can wipe an entire board of problems, while also getting a little bit of burn in there, which helps again pushing for game. And a large chunk of the effects such as Bisque, Magnetal, Terror Baby, etc. lack hard ones per turn restrictions, so these can be abused to make your end board a little bit stronger or play through a few more disruptions. But for every strength, with this deck it feels like there's 10 weaknesses, so starting off, the overall archetype just feels really clunky. The graveyard effects are the most synergy the archetype has with one another, especially when you consider the really weird anime-specific cards like Shadow Feeler, Twilight Joker, Nightmare, etc. Like, a lot of those type of cards are just really random and provide very little consistency between the cards, and something as simple as making an Xyz can take anywhere from 2 to 3 cards in your hand, and that's if you're lucky, and not taking into consideration your opponent's field because you will be going second most of the time. With that in mind, like a lot of the decks in this series, funnily enough, it has a hell of a time trying to go first, and some of the best cards in the deck like Magnet Doll, Condolence Puppet, as well as the in-archetype Xyz monsters either encourage or basically require the opponent to have an established board just to get any plays or effects done. And the best end board you could possibly make going first in this deck consists of like Harbinger Regulus, and that would probably require a perfect hand and all of your resources neg just for 2 negates. Even when going second as well, it's yet another archetype that falls victim to preying on opening a board breaker, as the deck itself, despite having the really nice protection given to it by Bisque Doll and Terror Baby, still struggles to set up a board period, much less through anything. It's like when your opponent has Called By and cross off of your Ash and your Imperm, and you're like super impressed, like, oh man, they're gonna make a really strong end board, only for them to just T-set pass. The sheer amount of locks that the deck has is infuriating. Dreary Doll only being able to be used for Gimmick Puppet Xyz because, God forbid, again, you'd want to put a Gimmick Puppet engine into your deck to make it worse. Gigantus Doll locking you purely into not only summoning Gimmick Puppets, but also attacking with Xyz monsters. Chimera Doll locking you into Machine Xyz monsters, of which the pool for 8s is a whopping 8 cards. Magnet Doll requiring you to control only Gimmick Puppets in order to get the special. I mean, it's just so restrictive, and it prevents you from properly utilizing the awesome array of rank 8s that the game has to offer, and sticking you to just their Xyz. Speaking of, the Xyz monsters themselves kinda suck. Like, they're not awful, don't get me wrong, but when you look at some of the effects of their fellow rank 8 Zexal archetype Galaxy Eyes, you sit and wonder, wow, they got an entire cavalcade of effects with removal, battle phase shenanigans, protection, huge stab boost atop already massive bodies, and Gimmick Puppet gets a pop. Maybe a little burn, a horrible enforced built-in win condition, and most of this requires you to open a rank up as well, as opposed to stacking it like the Galaxy Eyes monsters can. And they just feel so dated and slow, and their most recent support wave didn't even give them a better, like, more modern rank 8, but rather a rank 4 because they acknowledge that the level 4s barely have any synergy with the archetype, and spoiler alert, they still don't. So with all of these many weaknesses in mind, how are we making Gimmick Puppet better? I want this deck to succeed, so normally I don't get too in-depth on what exactly a deck needs in order for it to be better, but Gimmick Puppet was a special case here. So starting off, I wanted to give them a good option for when they're stuck with just one monster, and before you say anything, I fully acknowledge some of these may seem a little bit bloated, but I think they're necessary in order to make the deck feel better to play. I think a Link one that did something along the lines of Bujinki Ahashima's effect, summoning one from hand and one from grave, but allowing you to use 2 different levels and turn them into 4 or 8, and immediately Xyz summoning with them, would be incredibly appreciated. I wouldn't give it another effect or anything, and of course I would restrict it into only summoning Gimmick Puppets with its effect, but would make their barely functional hands at least get them an Xyz on board. Next, I think a way of actually making a turn 1 disruption would be very welcomed. Another rank 8 with something like, say, a quick effect to pop, spin, bounce, something like that, would be simple enough yet effective to have the pinnacle of end boards like Harbinger Pass be a thing of history. And then of course, because it is the gimmick of the deck, it would have to have a rank up version of it, so maybe something that had the same effect but en masse, and then did some form of attack modulation or burn or something to help push for game a bit better and fit with the other burn themes of the deck. Like, this would fix both going first and OTKing the issues that the deck has, and it would just make it a lot smoother to actually play. Now, here's where I'm going to get very specific. So, I was thinking about giving them a circular or even an Evil Eyes Unleashed, but I made a simple mock-up monster to help out consistency as well as swarming and bricky hands. so it'd be able to discard itself from hand in order to special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand, similar to something like Ice Jade Tremora, and this would not be a hard once per turn. And if it's sent to the graveyard as a hard once per turn, you can add a rank up magic from your deck to your hand, but you're locked into machines from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. It's simple but incredibly effective, allowing them to get cards that brick like Jury Doll or Magnet Doll going first out of the hand and onto the field, while simultaneously fetching one of the key gimmicks of the deck they never previously had access to by searching. And by locking you into machines instead of machine Xyz, you can still access something like Chimera Doll, but instead of adding rank up magics, you could also have an argument to let it search puppet spells or traps, because like, the two, or actually I think like, yeah, the one or two puppet spell or traps that aren't Gimmick Puppet related will be terrible for the deck. They search like, they do Fiend related stuff, like, it would allow them to like actually argue to play something like Perform Puppet or even the trap card Puppet Parade, which now that I think about it, I didn't even cover Puppet Parade, I'm sorry. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, especially some Gimmick Puppet monsters with different names from your deck up to the difference, then if your opponent's life points are at least 2k higher than yours, you can set a rank up magic normal spell from your deck, and then for the rest of the turn you're locked into Gimmick Puppets, you can only activate one Puppet Parade per turn. This is an urgent schedule, but like significantly worse because it's a trap card in a going second deck, and then also it's the only way to search rank up magics in the deck, but it requires the 2000 life point gimmick, which is really weird. Basically TLDR, it's way not worth it. But it would actually at least allow you to want to play something like Puppet Parade, Perform Puppet, and then actually have you a way to search Condolence Puppet or Junk Puppet, so you can like play less copies of Condolence and then actually fit room for other things. But it would also help for the next thing that I want to talk about, because on the topic of rank up magics, Konami, please give them their own rank up magic. Like, I'm aware that because they're a number archetype, and I think all the numbers have already been well explored, and I wouldn't say a C Xyz or anything like that, but all it would need to do is simple enough, just say target a machine Xyz you control, special from your extra deck a Gimmick Puppet monster that is one rank higher than that monster you control by using it as material, treat it as an Xyz, summon, transfer materials, blah blah blah, and just give it some actual application for its own archetype. I don't know, allow it to banish itself from grave to return 3 banished Gimmick Puppets to the graveyard or something like that. It doesn't have to be too crazy or anything, but it'd be really nice for them to have some form of identity like other rank up decks like Phantom Knights, Raid Raptor, etc., that not only have their own rank up magics, but can search them directly from the deck with ease. So I believe that is everything I have to say about Gimmick Puppets for this video. I know Sleeper Sunday, the point of it is to show decks that are actually like secretly strong and like could take a rogue status at a regional or something like that. This ended up not being the case because I thought they were better than they actually were, and then everyone voted for it for the Sleeper Sunday. And this deck just feels so frustrating to play because it's something that I genuinely feel is on the cusp of greatness. You have really powerful effects on things like Dreary Doll, Bisque Doll, Terror Baby, you have a really strong card in the form of a Gigantus Doll, and the deck does have some form of identity with the rank up magic and the removal effects. It just needs a little bit of TLC. Like, I think honestly this deck could be regional level if it got a 4 card wave of support that a lot of other archetypes, like for example Gishki, got during a core set. Like, I think the deck has a lot to prove. I think it does require at least some form of care, and I think that just a few cards though could end up making it a lot better. But I don't know though, I'm really just tired of talking about Gimmick Puppet for over an hour straight. That's just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as well as put this video and the channel into recommended. And if you like this content and want to see more like it, like the rest of my Sleeper Sunday series, I will be posting a poll on my community tab on YouTube with a few different deck options for what to use for the next episode every single month, but it will only be up for 24 hours sometime during the end of the month, so be sure to get your vote in while you can before it gets taken down. Then perhaps consider subscribing, because we're on our way to 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023, not to mention it supports the channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.